Hi, my name is Max Lawson, and I'm going to be presenting on transgender representation in media and the effects that it has on transgender youths. So I chose this topic because a majority of my friends identify within the LGBTQA plus community, including myself, and more of them, more so, they identify as trans or under the transgender umbrella. And I also know the general experience of seeing your identity portrayed in media in some stance, as I don't identify as heterosexual, but watching the movie Love, Simon for the first time, I cried because it was this person who, it may have been played by a straight actor, but this character had gone through everything that I had gone through of coming out and coming to terms with your sexuality and transitioning socially after coming out. And while not being heterosexual or not being cis. When I say cis, I mean within the community, it's come to mean comfortable in skin, which is a correlation to gender dysphoria, which is something that most, if not all, transgender people experience. And gender dysphoria is the literal definition is the condition of feeling one's emotional psychological identity as male or female to be opposite to one's biological sex. So if you're transgender, female to male, you're born in a female body, but you identify as male. So any of your more traditionally feminine attributes cause a great sense of discomfort for you, for your body, and often sometimes even hate towards that part of one's body. So some terms, there were some in the previous slide, but transgender, its literal definition is denoting or relating to a person whose sense of personal identity and gender does not correspond with their birth sex. As I explained before, male to female or female to male is you're born in a body that contains one sex, but you identify as the other. And non-binary is not transgender, but it's within the transgender umbrella. So not relating to, composed of, or involving just two things. But as a gender identity, it means you don't identify as male and you don't identify as female. You identify as something in between and something that is neither. And this is where they them pronouns come into play, because this person does non-binary individual doesn't identify as a he or a she. So they them. So there's a transgender identity and there's a transgender umbrella. The trans identity is, as I explained before, male to female or female to male. While the transgender umbrella includes those two identities, it also includes a bunch of others: non-binary, androgynous, intersex, genderqueer, hundreds of others that would take far too long to explain all of them. But there are actually trans individuals in the original gay rights movement, including at Stonewall, where primarily. More accurately, women of color, trans women of color. And most of them have been erased from that part of history. Until more recently, the last several years, when there's been monuments and articles and research done to note and to give credit to these trans women of color who are at the forefront of the original gay rights movement. And a lot of people assume that there is not a large portion of trans individuals in society, so that's why there's not a lot of representation. That's part of the reason why there's not, and why there shouldn't be very much representation of trans individuals. But in reality, there's about 1.4 million people who in the US alone who identify as transgender, and there's no active representation to portray that. There's no active continuous trans characters and trans actors in today's film and media, in today's mainstream film and media, because if there are, they're all such underground films and shows and home videos that nobody sees them. So an estimated 140,000 or so actors are in the US, and I couldn't find any sort of record of trans actresses. But through my own viewing of films and shows, and through my own digging, I found about roughly 24. But those are just the people that are known, and that's really not a lot. A main part of that being the cast of Pose, an FX TV show that centers around trans women of color in the 80s during the AIDS epidemic. And basically almost the entirety of the main cast are trans women of color, including a non-binary person of color as well. The OA and the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina both have trans masculine characters, which means they are born in a female body, but they identify as male. But the OA also has a trans masculine actor to play their trans character. The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina does not. As well as She-Ra, the new reboot on Netflix, they have a character named Double Trouble who is non-binary and canonically uses they/them pronouns. However, this character is a villain, but their identity is not treated as the reason that they are a villain. So their identity is not inclusive in why they're a villain. Okay, so for my experiential part of my project, I did a survey which received about 50 responses, almost entirely from Los Alamos. There are a few who are from students outside of the school, from friends of mine who I asked to take it. And for them, I was almost surprised because 6% said they identify as trans in some way. And that's a lot considering our demographic at school. And I know I just said 1.4 million in the US, but given our demographics and our numbers, it was highly unlikely for me to have any sort of higher number. This was also really surprising, but in a really good way, that almost 70% of people said they saw 1 to 3 trans characters. I know the big 20% that said none, but I'm focusing on the positives because comparatively to 2015, when there was only 1 trans character in all of Hollywood's films, that's a pretty good increase, all things considered. And then almost 60% of those people said that those characters were portrayed positively, meaning they weren't plot bunnies, they were not used as comedic relief, and they were not portrayed as a villain, most commonly as pedophiles, unfortunately. And my expectations were a lot worse, but this was a lot better than I thought it would be. So these are written survey responses that I did, written responses to the survey questions I asked that I couldn't figure out where else to put, but I thought were important. So in column 1 are the more negative responses that I really hurt me just reading them. But my survey was labeled trans youths. So even before taking this, you know what you're getting into. And this person went through and on every written response, they wrote there's 2 genders and nothing else. I couldn't care less how trans people are represented. That's dumb. Oprah can play someone with 5 kids, but that doesn't mean she has 5 kids. It's in the name. They act like they are in that situation. Yes, but so many cis actors who play trans characters, if there are trans characters, do not do their research, and they do not portray the feeling of dysphoria and social and physical transitioning and all of the experiences that come with being a trans person. And that's a great injustice to the trans people and what they go through to be who they are. Historically, there are not many documented trans people. Historically, there are not many documented gay people, but that's because they weren't in an environment where they could be out without the fear of exile and rejection or even being murdered. And it just made me think of Stalin, ironically enough, because he can make somebody completely disappear from history in a day. And it just got me thinking, like, if we can say that these people don't deserve representation because historically we don't see many of them, it's just saying that we don't need to acknowledge these people's existence at all, that they don't exist because they didn't exist from what we can see 100 years ago. I don't think that's right. And column 2 is the much more positive side. Still a little negative, but it comes and goes. It dehumanizes people like me by showing little to no dimension in the very few trans people we see in the media. When a character has no dimension, when they're two-dimensional and they don't progress and they don't grow, then the character is often forgotten and no one favorites them. No one cares, and they move on. And it's saying that we don't care about trans people, and that's messed up. Alex Fierro is Jennifer like me, and they are a favorite character of mine. I actually read the books that Alex Fierro is in. And for me, it was a really big moment of hesitation and kind of confusion when I first read about Alex, because I am so used to queerbaiting authors and writers saying, this character may be gay or this character may be trans, and then at the last moment taking that away and saying, oh, they're not. They never were gonna be. But when I realized that Alex was gender fluid, and that wasn't going to change, but it wasn't the only part of their character that was important, was really impactful to me as well. I used to be very intolerant towards transgender individuals, in that I didn't believe it to be a thing. Shows like Steven Universe taught me otherwise. So this is just such a apparent thing, because positive representation can change a person's opinion, can make someone less ignorant, and encourage them to be open to these people that do exist and that are not going away. So this one was just sad for me, because they just want to be viewed positively and as actual people and as normal, because they are normal, and they are just people trying to live as comfortably as possible and be who they are. And that's really just what representation in media will do for trans people and LGBT people in general. And despite the overwhelmingly positive student opinion in those first few survey responses, the research still shows that there's very few trans people in media, trans characters in media. And that's got to change, not only for trans individuals, but the whole LGBT community as a whole needs to just be portrayed positively, because these people aren't going away, and they've been here for as long as anyone can remember, even if they weren't allowed to be. And yeah.
And that still doesn't make it okay for white women to play Asian women. Still doesn't make it okay for cis people to play trans people.
Interview with him, and he said something that said, "It's easy to be who you are when who you are is popular."
Of course, I mean, like...
And I thought that really was something that really stuck out to me. Can you say what that means to you?
Well, it's truth, and being easy to be who you are when who you are is popular speaks volumes to those of us who have been marginalized, to those of us who have been disenfranchised, because we're not popular, so no one knew us. No one wanted to get to know us. No one wanted to speak to us. No one wanted to engage us, right? But it was okay for them to take our stories. It was okay for them to take our sayings, our slangs. It was okay for them to take our dance moves, which is movement.
Crucial to cast trans people in trans roles. The beginning of my sort of discovery of my gender identity was because I had access to the internet, and I was like researching and seeing other trans men on YouTube. It's important that people see themselves represented on screen. I think it really means a lot. Other young trans men who are trying to find someone to look up to, someone they can relate to, and just maybe feel like they're not as alone.
It's a favor because you're flicking your nose, essentially, at an entire demographic of people who are telling you we are not okay with this. And we're more than capable of not only telling our own stories, but telling stories in general.
If this is a way to challenge yourself as an actor, then I think you should let us challenge and play some cis roles. We've been asking for it for a very long time. It's something that we have always been able to do because we understand the experience of a woman. I've played cis roles before, but I haven't played that many. I've wanted to play more. And I haven't played them to a demographic that is higher up or to a demographic that is widespread. I haven't gotten a chance to do that. And if someone can do that and play our roles, then I think it should be allotted to us to play the roles that we know we're more comfortable with as well.
I mean, what is a cis role? You know what I mean? Like what we are conceptualizing as cis roles is like just somebody playing a role and telling a story that has nothing to do with their gender being dissected. I think we just want to tell stories that aren't always specifically about our experience as trans people. We want to tell stories that really investigate what it is to be a human being and have those human experiences with love, with family. But Pose is different in that it investigates it through the gaze of our experience.
But you have to also remember that when we talk about the Stonewall Revolution, because it was not a riot, right? These people were fighting for their rights. Those were trans women who could not live as themselves that would go into into Stonewall. And when the police raided the place, the lesbians would dance with the gay men and vice versa.
Yeah.
When you're, a trans woman and you may not have cispassability, who are you going to dance with? Your target.